Good morning. Today we're going to do a little bit of a monochromatic scene. This is from our kit that is called Oh Lonesome Me. And when you purchase the kit, it includes your rubber. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to stamp our wolf kind of here in the middle. We are working on Peddler's Den semi-gloss cardstock, and we are going to then mask our wolf. Now we are masking our wolf so that we can tuck a riverbank beneath it. You mask to tuck things behind objects, and this also includes when you're trying to tuck things beneath an object. So we're going to sit this wolf right here on this riverbank, and we're going to press firmly. Alrighty, there we go. Now the wolf is howling at the moon, so we're going to first stamp the other side of the riverbank. Of course, the mask is on the wolf, so this allows us to tuck this behind him. There we go. And then if he's howling at the moon, we have to have a moon. So I'm going to throw a mask on the top edge of the mountain range here, and we're going to tuck a moon behind that mountain range. Okay, there we have it. Now, because of the time constraints, I'm going to show you one way of doing this scene using monochromatic. We have different versions of how you can use this kit, but we're gonna try to go really fast and easy today. And to do that, we're going to try to use a more monochromatic scene. Now, if you wanted to get really particular about your coloring, you could mask the river here to color above it. You could mask the riverbank to color above it. You can get crazy with your masking. And frankly, sometimes I do. But sometimes we want faster, simpler. And today we're going to focus on how to do that faster, simpler. So for starters, I am going to put the mask back on the mountains here because I want the sharp edge of the mountains, and frankly that's the easiest way to do it. Now whatever your lightest color is, when you put that down, you kind of need to saturate the surface of your paper to get that ink slipping and moving around. So I'm kind of concentrating here with my robin's egg blue to try to saturate that surface, which will enable me to move all the inks that I put on top of it around a little easier. Now this is going to be my lightest value. And we're not masking the moon because frankly we want it to look like the moon is just coming up and some of the clouds are drifting across it. Now when you're doing this technique, you always want to be comfortable, so you you want to be able to have the same stroke, and it needs to be ergonomic. So to make sure that you get that, the easiest way is to rotate your paper instead of trying to move your arm. Now, of course, we can leave a little bit of a glow around the moon because it would be putting out some light. And we can always come back and we can do a little more on this later. I'm going to move to my Yorktown blue now. It's darker than the robin's egg. And let's see if we can maybe begin to pull some, well, the moon may still be wet, so I may actually move on to another area of the card because we don't want to severely smear the moon. But I hope you can see that this edge is darker here now than actually the moon area. And we're creating that by layering up the inks. Let's go over here and get a little more. And as I rotate my tip up on edge, it allows me to get what I call thin wispies. And these will be important as we pull some clouds across the moon in just a little bit. Okay, so let's remove this while we let that moon dry a little bit more. And I'm gonna remove the wolf mask too. And I'm gonna set this aside with the, there we go. Now let's go down here and let's start working on some of the other areas. Actually, I'm going to put the mask back on the, I don't want to have to be careful. Now, since this is going to be monochromatic, we can actually pull our blue tint throughout the whole scene. And again, we're working on that surface saturation. Your ink is more than just color. Your ink is your lubricant. And a lot of people don't realize that. Once you begin to think of your ink as your lubrication, it kind of changes the way you approach projects like this. Move back around. Now I'm using the Peddler's Den blending ovals with a Memories Essential stylus handle. You can use our blending ovals with the color box handles, and we are trying to develop our own handle. It actually has been challenging, to say the least. I have 20 minutes to try to get this done, which is why we're going monochromatic and using fewer colors. Now we're kind of trying to leave some highlights where you would normally see the cast light of the moon. and we can reinsert some highlights later with our gel pen. You can also, if you want to do a real fast rendition of this, you can also use stipple brushes. They work really, really well. I tend to like my edges dark, and we'll be finishing them out with some black. Our eyes are drawn to light, and because of that, if you darken your edges to kind of frame your pieces, it tends to draw the viewer in. I wonder if the moon is dry enough to try to pull some clouds across it. Let's see here what we get. Yeah, we're going to have to come back in a bit and deepen this all up. Alrighty. Let's come in with some streaks in our water. Now, of course, it would be darker by the shoreline because that would be in the shadows, and we're going to address that too. Okay, to address that a little bit better, I'm going to put this mask back on so that we can really get up next to the shore. And I'm going to put a mask along the bottom as well. And remember, we still have the mask on our wolf. So that's protecting our wolf. All right, let's see if we can transition to some black now. Get some contrast. Make sure our mask is down good. Now, I'm actually laying ink down on the mask, and I'm actually using the edge of the blending foam. I really kind of need a little more of the blue here. Getting it too heavy here. Because see, this would be kind of shadowed there. We're trying to keep the shadows near the riverbank, although this is a night scene, so it can be quite dark. All right, let's see about getting some black up around here. Again, we're going to kind of pull some across the moon because we want it to appear like there are some clouds floating around. Let's come back over here. So by keeping the mask on here, I'm able to get kind of a dark edge, which will then illuminate the top edge of the mountain peaks. And like I said, it is supposed to be a night scene, so now I'm going to set this aside for a moment. And I'm going to try to transition to our midnight blue, which is darker than Yorktown. And we tend to drag and pounce. What's happening here in the sky is I'm beginning to get rolls of ink. When your paper saturation gets too much, that happens. When it becomes too great. So what that means is that at some point here we're going to have to walk away from this, and we're going to have to allow some of that ink to set up a little bit and dry a little bit. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's come back down now to the water. Now this is my midnight blue. Oops, closed my pad. Let's flip this around. And let's come down here where it's going to be darker. See, we've got a bright highlight here, and we have a darker highlight over here, assuming the moon is casting this way. Okay, let's throw a little mask on the roof of the shack, because we're going to want to keep that light. Now let's see, I've got midnight on this. let's kind of get some shadows going here at the base of the mountain and around the cabin. It would definitely be shadowed there. And in a bit here, we're going to actually add some black there too. Okay, let's see if we can blend this up a little bit. And I think I'm going to set that aside for a moment and come back and try to get some black in there. Let's see, let's come this way. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but the more saturation we've had, at some points I can actually go in and I can make a correction, if you will, by, you know, using the lighter color of ink and moving the ink that's underneath of it. I don't want to disrupt this highlight here. So let's see, that's my black one. That's my light blue. Alrighty, let me come back here and see if I can move some of this around. I hope you can see that because it's actually moving, it's blending, and it's moving the ink that's already down. And softening edges and feathering it out a little bit. But you see, by masking this originally and making the sky dark, it's tending to illuminate some of the peaks, which is one of my goals. Now let's see what we can do here on the foreground. Let's get some ink down. Now, I have a more colorful version of this, something that's not monochromatic, and it has some purples and it has some green in it. But we started out doing this one monochromatic, and so we are going to just stick with our blues and our blacks. And we're going to make sure that edge is pretty dark. We could have some illumination here from the moon. And of course it would be dark around the wolf, because the wolf would be creating his own shadow. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to grab some black. And we're going to start to darken this edge a little bit. And bring some more ripples into the water here. Okay. And again, we do some tapping, we do some dragging. But we've got a lot of ink on the surface now, so it's tending to roll and saturate. And you can see how it's lighter here than it is here. We'll be fixing that later. But to really fix it, what we really have to do is we have to allow that ink to set up a little bit. And I tend to go back and forth between my colors. If you have taken any Copic marker classes or anything like that, they'll tell you that you use your lighter colors to do your blending. And, you know, we tend to do that as well. Okay, that's coming along pretty well. So let's think about taking the mask off of the cabin there. And like I said, we are wanting it to be monochromatic. So this area would be a little bit more shadowed than the roof. And darken that a little bit so that the roof stands out. And then let's see if we can maybe darken here a little bit. Oops, got a little too much on there. Yeah, I'm going to have to go back with one of my lighter blues and work on that a little bit. See, the lighter blue will move that. See how it moved that a little bit? Now let's see if we can... Alright, not too bad. Now, the wolf himself is going to look awfully white because of everything that's around him. Now, of course, he wouldn't be that white. So I'm going to try to take some of the ink off of my tip here, and I'm going to try to, first of all, his back end is away from the moon. It would definitely be shadowed. So we're going to try to bring that into shadow a little bit. And then you can use a marker, you can use a mini tip, you can use all kinds of things to actually do a little bit better on the coloring of the wolf. Tapping in a little bit of shadowing here to give us the contrast. So that we don't lose the actual shape. I keep getting too much ink on my tip. Fortunately, I can go back and I can kind of fix that. Okay. And by deepening the banks, you illuminate. You have to have that contrast to create the illumination. Okay? So you see how that's coming along. For the moment, since we need to let some of that dry, I'm going to grab my white gel pen and I'm going to start doing some of the highlighting. Let's pop this out a little bit more. And let's pop a little more out on the peaks here. Now, as the gel pen dries, it will tend to blend a little bit with the ink that's down. So after it's completely dry, it will actually look more subtle. And if you ever get too heavy of a dot or a line or whatever, let it dry completely. You can go back and you can take your fingernail and gently thin it down or whatever you need to do. But I want that top of that mountain range to be illuminated. You've got a few little peaks like here that maybe need to be a little more illuminated. Of course, the moon would be concentrated here. I'm not so worried about over here. I tend to do tiny little lines, but I tend to make a lot of my lines dashes. It just, I think it makes it look just a little more natural. maybe something like that. Okay, now let's come down here. Let's put some highlights on the land here. Starting to pop it up a little bit. And let's go over here. This rock could be popped out just a little bit more. And of course it would be a little bit shadowed, so we don't want to pop it out too much. Now we're going to take, well, I don't want to do that yet. I don't know if our ink is dry enough yet or not. Let's see. Let's do some little white water ripples here. Extend our highlights a little bit, break things up a little bit. And then over here we already have some highlights, but we're gonna extend them a little bit too. We're just lightening them a little bit. Okay. Now to me, this looks a little bit odd. We're going to have to add a little bit of color there. The highlights are just too white, especially near the shore. Okay, that's not too bad. And that was my robin's egg blue, by the way. Now I'm going to see if this ink is dry enough to work on the edges here where it was rolling. It's still a little bit. You know, honestly, what I usually do is I usually will let this set overnight, and then I'll come back in, and if there's areas that have lightened up or areas that were rolled, I'll come back in and I'll fix it then. Yeah, that's going to have to be fixed a little bit later. That's definitely got a little bit of a problem. So over here, farther from the moon, we'll see if we can deepen this up. But even that's still rolling, so it isn't dry enough. One of the finishing touches on this piece is going to be our big, tall, dead tree. Let's see what we can do right here. You always want to get your surface saturated, but then eventually the tooth of the paper is not adequate to hold all that ink. So you need to plan to let it dry out a little bit and then go back and put your finishing touches on. And that's another reason that when I do in-person classes, I actually don't encourage them to totally finish things up until, in other words, not glue things together until like the next day. So let's see if we can throw our big tree in. I know some artists that do their videos will splice them together over the course of a few days. And I'm going to probably have to do that too. So here is a big foreground tree. Things that are close to you appear bigger. Now I may have some trouble stamping this because of the saturation of the ink on the paper. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So we're okay there. If you want, you can do a little bit of tree on the other side too. Let's put a shorter version of this over here. And you can even come in and do some random sticks at the base of. Trees are wonderful objects because you can use them for so many different things. Now this is far too wet to do much else with at the moment, but I'll be finishing this up at another time. Thank you. And we're back after our scene has had a little bit of time to dry here. It actually doesn't look too bad, but I am going to take a little more black, and I am going to try to darken these areas here where the ink rolled. And let's go down here. Darken this up a little bit. Smooth it out. You know, when it rolls, you get light areas, but it also gives you some rough areas. So we're smoothing and we're darkening. And I want a little bit of highlighting there, but not like it was, not severely. All right, let's see here. See how the ink is now sticking to the paper because it's dried enough that the tooth of the paper is grabbing the ink again. Earlier we just had way too much saturation. The surface just simply couldn't hold more. So if you've ever had that problem and you didn't know what was going on, now you do. And let's see, let's deepen a few of these sky patterns. That actually looks decent. Okay, let's come back over here. And of course, I usually have a little more glow around my moons. We do want to have some clouds drifting across. That's not too bad. Now, I'm not 100% happy with the division between the moon and the mountain, so I'm going to try to boost that up a little bit. So I'm going to grab a little more black ink, and I'm going to bring it across here a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Maybe just a little too stark. Okay. Okay, that gives us a little more division between the moon and the mountains. And you could just kind of keep going here. But at this point, I'm going to take a little bit of time to come back with my pen. And let's do a little bit of accentuating along the tree. And it doesn't even have to be everything. But see how a little bit of white detailing can really pop out some of your elements. Now, I usually don't entirely outline them, and I'm trying to kind of do more of the side that has the moon than the opposite side, and assuming that as it gets closer to the ground, it would be less illuminated. And of course, this is one of the many things that is really subject to an artist's interpretation. You may like it, you may not like it, you may want more of it, you may want none of it. But at the end of the day, I think it does help. I mean, look, the tree now has has some form. And we can do that with a little of it over here too. Yeah, when I started this video, I was hoping I could make it a 20-minute video because I have an event coming up that requires 20-minute videos, and that was a huge fail. But I'm hoping that some of you will enjoy this anyway. Let's see if we can figure out where that tree trunk is. At least a little of it. Let's see, maybe here. So I'm curious as to what you're all thinking. My illuminating on my trees is usually pretty sparing. I like it. I think it makes a big difference, but I'm pretty subtle with it. And like I said, you could work on this forever. At some point it just becomes a matter of when do you want to be done? Sometimes a little bit of highlighting down into the darker values is nice too. It's one of those things that needs to be a little bit sparing. And I think that's a common misnomer among stampers. They'll try adding something and they just add too much. And then they don't like it and they don't understand why. Subtle is valuable. Having a few little highlights that just help give things form is kind of nice, but you don't want to overdo it. So let me see if I can flip this over. So what do you think? That's the quick and easy version, the monochromatic version. Here is the version that has more color in it. Not sure which one you like best. Hope you enjoy the video. Thank you for joining me. Goodbye now.